A lot of things happened in the year 2004. Mark Zuckerberg launched a new social networking platform for Harvard University students, which would go on to be renamed as Facebook. George W. Bush is re-elected as President of the United States, defeating his Democratic challenger John Kerry. And preliminary hearings began in the trial of Saddam Hussein for war crimes and crimes against humanity. In sport, Michael Schumacher won his 7th and last Formula 1 world title with Scuderia Ferrari. The Olympics returned home as Athens hosted the games of the 28th Olympiad, and Portugal hosted the European Championships, which would be won by the biggest of underdogs in Greece. On the subject of football, 2004 would mark the 100th anniversary of FIFA, the sport's international governing body. As part of the celebrations, Brazilian legend Pele was asked to choose a list of the greatest living footballers, which was unveiled at a gala ceremony in London on the 4th of March 2004. Despite being referred to as the FIFA 100, the number of players listed was actually 125, as Pele had originally been asked to list 100 players, 50 active and 50 retired. However, he allegedly found it too difficult to narrow down his choices. Thus, the term FIFA 100 refers to the number of years the organisation has been in existence. Upon the release of the list, the selection methodology was almost immediately questioned. Former politician turned football pundit David Mellor summarised that the list was more politically motivated rather than based purely on footballing grounds. Mellor suggested that the selections came from then head of FIFA Sepp Blatter, pointing to the wide geographical spread of the players selected. Mellor argued that had Pele selected the nominees for the list himself, that there would be a much more skewed bias towards South American and European players. BBC columnist Tim Vickery put forth similar assertions in the following days. One of Pele's old teammates, Gerson, with whom he played alongside in Brazil's World Cup winning side of 1970, responded to his omission by tearing up a copy of the FIFA 100 live on Brazilian television. Pele stated that upon leaving out another one of his former teammates in Jairzinho, the only player to have scored in every round of the World Cup to that point, that it was, quote, very difficult in choosing. Sometimes you have pain in your heart when you have to leave someone out. Everyone has their own favourite 100 players, and I just tried to make as few mistakes as possible. They asked me to pick 50 current players and 50 retired players from a short list of 300, but I could not manage that, so I've picked 50 current and 75 former players. Other greats of the game such as Marco van Basten and Uwe Seeler refused to take part in the project as a point of principle. So to the list itself. As mentioned, 125 players were selected, 50 active and 75 retired, with 37 nations represented by 123 male and just 2 female players. As of the time of writing, there's only one player on this entire list who is still active, that being Gianluigi Buffon, currently plying his trade as the captain of Serie B side Parma at the age of 44. Keep in mind that this list was released in March of 2004, so there shall be no mention of the likes of Lionel Messi, Cristiano Ronaldo, Kaká, Arjen Robben, David Villa or Kevin De Bruyne. Of the 10 players selected from Argentina, it was an even split of those who were still currently active and players who had since hung up their boots. It was a forward-heavy selection for La Albiceleste, with 6 of the 10 having been deployed at the top end of the pitch. The 5 active players nominated were Gabriel Batistuta, Hernan Crespo, Javier Saviola, Juan Sebastian Veron, and Javier Zanetti. As impressive as those 5 are, the remaining quintet was a truly staggering selection of talent, with Alfredo Di Stefano, Mario Kempes, Diego Maradona, Daniel Passarella, and Omar Sivori filling out the ranks for the now 3-time world champions. Only 3 Belgians made the list, all of which had long since retired. The first of which was Juan Koelmans, who was part of the side that had reached the final of the 1980 European Championships, followed by former Bayern Munich and national team goalkeeper Jean-Marie Pfaff, with former defensive midfielder Frankie van der Elst rounding out the trio. Unsurprisingly perhaps, Brazil have the most players from a single nation on the entire list, with 15 nominees. Arguably, even less surprisingly, Pele included himself within that selection. Only 6 active players made the cut, the majority of which had just won the most recent World Cup in 2002, with Cafu, Rivaldo, Roberto Carlos, Romario, Ronaldinho and Ronaldo making the list. The rest of the Brazilian contingent was a who's who of the game, with legends and world champions completing the set. The remaining 9 included Carlos Alberto, Falcao, Pele himself, Junior, Rivellino, Djalma Santos, Nilton Santos, Socrates and Zico. A truly incredible array of talent. Only a single player from the Lions forced their way onto the list. However, it is difficult to argue against his inclusion. Former Barcelona legend and winner of the 1994 Ballon d'Or Hristo Stoichkov cemented his place as one of the game's true greats throughout his career, helping lead his nation to 4th place in the 1994 World Cup in the United States. The second nation in a row to have a sole nomination, the indomitable Lions of Cameroon were represented by the hero of their 1990 World Cup campaign, Roger Milla, the oldest goalscorer in World Cup finals history, having found the net 4 years later at the 1994 edition, solidifying his status in the game as a true cult hero. It's hard to argue the inclusion of the two players selected from La Roja, as both had established themselves as possibly the greatest talents that the country has ever produced. Elias Figueroa is widely regarded as one of the greatest centre-halves in the history of the game, showcasing his composure and elegance at 3 separate World Cups. In contrast, his compatriot Ivan Zamorano was a fiery, combative forward throughout his illustrious career at such clubs as Sevilla, Real Madrid and Inter Milan. One of the most recognisable players of the late 80s and early 90s, Carlos Valderrama was known as much for his distinctive hairstyle as much as his precise passing and technical skill. El Pibe gained 111 caps for the national side, as well as being recognised as South American Player of the Year on 3 separate occasions throughout his career. The Croatia side of 1998 played their way into the hearts of millions following their 3rd place finish at that competition. The catalyst for their success was their star striker Davor Šuker, who finished with the tournament's Golden Boot. He remains his country's all-time leading goalscorer, and with 240 club goals for the likes of Real Madrid and Arsenal, his place on this list is thoroughly justified. Two midfield maestros from very different eras were selected for the list for the former Czechoslovakia. Josef Masopust led his country to the 1962 World Cup final, and was selected by his country as the most outstanding player of the past 50 years in 2004. In the same year, 2004, the current Ballon d'Or winner hailed from the Czech Republic, with Juventus winger Pavel Nedved being recognised as the world's best player, beating the likes of Thierry Henry and Paolo Maldini. Three of the most recognisable names in 90s football, the Laudrup brothers Michael and Brian, along with the goalkeeping colossus Peter Schmeichel, all played at the highest level throughout their careers, with both Brian and Peter going on to be a part of the Denmark side which won the 1992 European Championships. All three would win a plethora of silverware at club level, including the Champions League and Super Cup, along with top European leagues, whilst playing in some of the biggest clubs on the continent. Two World Cup winners made the cut along with 5 other stellar talents for the Three Lions. Both Gordon Banks and Bobby Charlton lifted the Jules Rimet Trophy in 1966 as part of the men's team's greatest ever triumph. They were joined by fellow legends Kevin Keegan and Gary Lineker as the 4 former players nominated for the list. The 3 remaining names were world-class talents in their own right, playing at the highest level, with David Beckham, Alan Shearer, and former World Player of the Year Michael Owen rounding out the nominees. At the time of the release of the FIFA 100, Les Bleus were the reigning European champions, having defeated Italy in an epic final 4 years previously. The 7 active players selected were all a part of that title-winning squad, as well as being members of the 1998 World Cup winning team, with Marcel Desailly, Thierry Henry, Robert Pires, Lilian Thuram, David Trezeguet, Patrick Vieira, and Zinedine Zidane all being selected for the list. The remaining 6 players were a true representation of the country's ability to produce world-class talent throughout the generations, with Eric Cantona, Didier Deschamps, Just Fontaine, Raymond Kopa, Jean-Pierre Papin, Michel Platini, and Marius Trésor completing the nominees. Despite their reputation as one of the powerhouses of European football, Germany were going through somewhat of a transition during this period, so much so that only 2 active players were selected for the list for Die Mannschaft. Both selections played for Bayern Munich at the time, with midfield maestro Michael Ballack and legendary goalkeeper Oliver Kahn receiving the honour. The rest of the nominees were made up of players who were no longer active, as Franz Beckenbauer, Paul Breitner, Jürgen Klinsmann, Sepp Maier, Lothar Matthäus, Gerd Müller, Karl-Heinz Rummenigge, and the aforementioned Uwe Seeler rounding out the German selections. Only a single nominee was included from the Black Stars, then it was inarguable that the choice to include Abedi Pele was the correct one. Born Abedi Ayew, the attacking midfielder is most known for his spell in Europe, which included winning the Champions League with Marseille in 1993. Following his retirement, he has competed in more charity matches than any other player, and was awarded Ghana's highest honour, the Order of the Volta, for his devout services to his country. It is almost impossible to imagine what the world of modern football would be without the Hungarian legend Ferenc Puskás. Arguably the game's first global superstar, Puskás made his name at Honvéd in his homeland capital, before getting his move to Real Madrid in 1958, where he cemented himself as one of the greatest to ever play the game. During this time, he played for and captained the Hungarian national side, nicknamed the Mighty Magyars, who are now regarded as one of the most influential teams in the history of European football. Despite their defeat in that epic European Championship final to France 4 years previously, the Azzurri were still a side filled to the brim with international superstars. Those stars that were selected for the list who were still active would go on to define a generation of Italian players throughout the 2000s, with Roberto Baggio, Gianluigi Buffon, Alessandro Del Piero, Paolo Maldini, Alessandro Nesta, Francesco Totti, and Christian Vieri all making the cut. The remaining 7 were a selection of those who had defined the previous generations, featuring Franco Baresi, Giuseppe Bergomi, Gianpiero Boniperti, Giacinto Facchetti, Gianni Rivera, Paolo Rossi, and Dino Zoff, rounding out the nominees. Arguably the most recognisable player to come out of Japan up until that point, in part due to his eye-catching hairstyles, Hidetoshi Nakata blazed a trail for Asian players, proving to the world that the region had more than its fair share of talent. Nakata signed for Perugia following the 1998 World Cup, and remained in Europe for the rest of his career, taking in spells at Roma, Fiorentina and Bolton Wanderers in the Premier League. A true pioneer for African football, George Weah laid a path laced with silverware for those who came after him, as he won the biggest prizes in the club game. A litany of league titles in Italy and France, as well as domestic and European Cup success, Weah also gained a vast number of individual honours, including the 1995 Ballon d'Or. Following his stellar career, Weah threw himself into humanitarian work and, in 2018, was sworn in as President of Liberia, a post which he has held to this day. A prolific goal scorer by any generation standards, Mexican forward Hugo Sanchez racked up an outstanding record of 562 career goals in 956 games for both club and country. Arguably most well known in Europe for his spells with various La Liga clubs, Sanchez is the 4th highest goal scorer in the history of the league. Not only did he win the league title with UNAM in Mexico, he has also managed the same side to title success following the end of his playing days, as well as taking charge of his national side between 2006 and 2008. Despite having underwhelmed at Euro 2000 and not even qualified for the 2002 World Cup, the Dutch still had quite the talented contingent within their ranks, as current stars Dennis Bergkamp, Edgar Davids, Ruud van Nistelrooy, and Clarence Seedorf ended up on the list. Unsurprisingly, the majority of Dutch nominees came from their glory days, with Marco van Basten, Johan Cruyff, Ruud Gullit, René and Willy van de Kerkhoff, Johan Neeskens, Rob Rezenbrink, and Frank Rijkaard rounding out the selection. One of the most recognisable and revered players to ever come out of the continent of Africa, JJ Okocha brought a tangible excitement to every stadium he played in. He was the most expensive African player of all time upon his move from Fenerbahce to PSG in 1998 for around £14 million. At the time of the release of the FIFA 100, Okocha was plying his trade in the Premier League for Bolton Wanderers, a pairing that was as unconventional as Okocha himself, but one which is still remembered fondly by all who witnessed it. Regarded by many as the greatest player that the United Kingdom has ever produced, George Best's flame burned for only a short period of time, but it burned bright as 1,000 suns. His unparalleled dribbling skill, flair, pace and balance was a revelation to audiences in the 1960s and early 70s, leading him to be crowned the European Footballer of the Year in 1968. Unfortunately for Best, his personal demons eventually became too much. However, it speaks volumes that he is still held in the highest regard in the game, despite his relatively short spell at the top of it. In a playing career that spanned 21 years, Julio Cesar Romero Insfran, better known as Romerito, left an indelible mark on South American football. He spent the majority of his club career in Paraguay, however he did take in spells in the US with the New York Cosmos and FC Barcelona in Spain. On the international stage, he helped lead his country to the Copa America in 1979, as well as qualification to the World Cup in 1986, following a 28-year hiatus for La Albirroja. Renowned for his technique, shooting ability and dead ball prowess, the man nicknamed El Nene may not have the biggest trophy cabinet of anyone on this list, but the impact he left on the sport itself is inarguable, so much so that even Pele himself named Cubillas his heir apparent. He plied his trade at 3 separate World Cup tournaments, winning the silver boot at the 1978 edition, as well as leading Peru to the 1975 Copa America title. Almost as recognisable for his trademark moustache as he was for his creativity and skill, it's fair to say that Boniek made sure that he would be remembered one way or another. An incredibly versatile player who excelled in a number of positions, he is most well known for his time in Italy, winning multiple trophies with Juventus and Roma. Since his retirement, he dipped his toe in management, including the Poland national team, and currently serves as vice president of UEFA. Three of not only the greatest players to come out of Portugal, but 3 of the greatest to ever take the pitch were selected from the nation that would host the upcoming European Championships. An icon throughout the 60s and 70s, the great Eusebio stunned crowds with his sheer power, athleticism and finishing ability, all whilst revolutionising how a forward could affect all aspects of play throughout the pitch. His contemporaries on this list may not have left the same mark on the sport, but both Luis Figo and Rui Costa became legends in their own right, with their flair and creativity leading them both to a multitude of accolades and silverware. Despite his harsh and brash demeanour both on and off the pitch, it cannot be argued that Roy Keane was one of the very best in his position throughout his playing days. His work rate, desire and physicality, combined with his intelligence, distribution and ability to dictate the tempo of the game, was the catalyst that led him to 19 major trophies throughout his club career, including 7 Premier Leagues, 4 FA Cups and the Champions League in 1999. A true icon of the 80s and 90s, Hadji was given the nicknames of the Commander and the King, an indication of the esteem he was and still is held in to this day. His style of play was frequently compared to Diego Maradona due to his incredible technical prowess. He was also more than capable of a spectacular long-range strike, as well as showing deceptive strength despite his small stature. A serial winner throughout his playing career, he continued the trend in his managerial roles, including at Galatasaray, where he spent 5 years as a player. A man who has become inexorably linked with Spartak Moscow, the man known as the Iron Curtain throughout his career, is regarded as the second greatest Russian goalkeeper of all time, behind the legendary Lev Yashin, who had passed away before the publication of the list and therefore did not qualify. Known for his long throws and positional awareness between the sticks, Desaev was part of a number of title-winning sides for Spartak, as well as the Soviet Union side that finished runners-up at the 1988 European Championships. Arguably one of the most important figures in the history of British football, the man known as King Kenny not only made his mark on the sport as an outstanding player, winning everything there was to win at club level, including several league titles and European Cups, but as a manager where he was just as successful, including leading Blackburn Rovers to an unlikely Premier League title. Not only is Dalglish respected for his exploits within football, but he has also made the mark outside of the game with his charity and humanitarian work, raising money for causes such as cancer research and various children's charities. Ever since the release of this list, one name has always raised more eyebrows than any other. El Hadji Diouf was undoubtedly a talented player, however his unpredictability on the pitch was matched by his unpredictability off it. When his name is mentioned within the game, many will point to his controversial behaviour above anything he did on the pitch, despite having played at the highest level in both England and Scotland, as well as appearing for his country at the 2002 World Cup and being crowned African Footballer of the Year on 2 separate occasions. Regarded as one of the greatest Asian players of all time, the current Ulsan Hyundai head coach made his name on the international stage, starring at 4 consecutive World Cup tournaments. Known for his long-range passing and ability to lead from the back, Hong was given the nickname the Eternal Libero, with his performances leading him to being placed inside the top 25 twice in FIFA World Player of the Year voting, finishing 21st in 1996 and 17th in 2002. Despite being just 4 years away from the beginning of their dominance of international football, only 2 current stars from La Roja made the list. Both of those nominees crossed the El Clasico divide, as Luis Enrique, who had played for both, and Raul, who is synonymous for his time in Madrid, were serial winners throughout their respective club careers. The third nominee was also a former alum of Los Blancos. Emilio Butragueño made over 450 appearances for Real, helping lead the side to multiple league titles and 2 UEFA Cup triumphs. Both members of the Turkey side that shocked the world at the 2002 World Cup, both Rüştü Rekber and Emre Belözoğlu forged outstanding careers for themselves during their playing days. Rüştü would become an icon at both Beşiktaş and Fenerbahçe, as well as making the UEFA Team of the Year in 2002, while Emre would go on to turn out for the likes of Inter, Atletico Madrid and Newcastle United throughout his 20+ year career, despite several controversial incidents during that time. One of the most feared and prolific forwards throughout the 1990s and early 2010s, Shevchenko could be deployed all across the front line and was equally as devastating no matter where he played. Most well known for his spells at Dinamo Kyiv and AC Milan, Shevchenko's trophy cabinet can rival the very best in the game, with a number of league titles, domestic cups and European silverware. He is the all-time leading goalscorer for the Ukrainian national team, whom he would eventually go on to manage, leading them to the quarter-finals of Euro 2020. The only 2 female players on this list came from the nation that has dominated the women's game over the past few decades. Both Michelle Akers and Mia Hamm laid the groundwork for future generations with their outstanding achievements within the game. Both were part of the 1996 Olympic team, which won the gold medal in Atlanta, as well as leading the US to World Cup glory in 1991 and 1999. Akers was inducted into the National Soccer Hall of Fame in 2004, with Hamm being inducted into the World Football Hall of Fame, the first woman to ever do so. Regarded as one of the great playmakers, El Principe's elegant and creative style of play left a legacy which has permeated through the generations. Most well known for his spells at River Plate and Marseille, he captured numerous pieces of silverware at club level, as well as 3 Copa America titles with Uruguay. Despite his lack of pace, Francescoli possessed outstanding dribbling skill, and his ability on the ball, combined with his incredible vision, served as an inspiration to the great Zinedine Zidane, who listed him as his greatest influence. So there it is, the list of the greatest living footballers from 2004, according to the great Pele. Whether or not the legendary forward came up with the nominees himself, or if he was just being used as the face of the project, it is hard to argue against the majority of inclusions that made their way onto the list. It would be interesting to see something similar done in the future with another legend of the game, as something like this acts as a rather insightful time capsule for future generations to look back at. What do you think to the idea of the FIFA 100? Would you like to see it done again in the future? Let me know in the comment section down below. If you did enjoy this video, please do hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you as always in the next one.